Welcome back, friends. In this video, I'm going to make several changes just because I want to show you how to do some different things still with the project. Okay, so beginning with this basic stage where we left off in the last video, and go back into the source view for a second. And remember, on the bottom, we had the jQuery right here. So I'm going to disable the jQuery behavior, and I'm going to replace it with behavior coded up in C#. Okay, similar kind of behavior. Obviously, I'm trying to show you as many different things as possible here. So I'm going to take this, I'm just going to comment it out. So hit comment out across the top on the toolbar, and that's it. It's disabled. This is how you make comments like that, okay? See that? 2 dashes, percent symbol, and arrow right. 2 dashes, percent symbol, and an arrow left. That's it. Okay, I hope you've got that. Now, let's take a look at the things that we're going to change up here. So switch back to design view. And remember, we have a calendar control, which by default, because we had display : none as a style on it, it's not visible. So go back to source view for a second, scroll up to the top, and find the calendar. The calendar is right here. Okay, remember we had this style equals display : none. I'm going to remove that for a second. Remember, this causes it not to be viewable in the preview, so I'm going to remove it and go back to design for a second. And notice now it is visible here, okay? And what I want to do is simulate some behaviors using different controls. So let's take a look at what I mean more concretely. First, what I'm going to do is from the left side here, I'm going to add a checkbox. So I'm going to type checkbox. Okay, not there, obviously. Let me remove that. But in the toolbox search box. So left press and then drop a checkbox into the page. And notice the default text on the box is checkbox 1 within square brackets. We are going to change that. So right click on it and then go to properties. And we have to be very clear on what we mean here with the checkbox, how we want it to operate. When the page first launches, we will make the calendar invisible. And then after the page is launched, we will make the calendar visible by clicking on the box. So to make that very clear, with the checkbox selected in the properties panel, I'm going to change the text on it so it says check to show calendar, like that. So we understand what the purposes of the box. So check to show calendar. All right, and now make sure you keep the properties panel open and select the calendar instead. Okay, so show the calendar in the properties panel and then change where it says visible. By default it says true. You're going to change that so it says false. I hope you've got that, okay? So now go back to source view for a second and make sure that on your calendar control here things are properly modified. I'm going to split this over multiple lines, pull this to the left a little bit. So this is the calendar control. ID calendar 1, run at server, true. On selection changed, remember this is the hookup to C#, to the C# default.aspx.cs file. Right there, that's the connection to it. And then visible equals false. So that means this will operate when the page is first launched. That's what we are going to do first. Okay, I want to confirm this has worked. So build the page, Control-Shift-B, and then go down below. I'm going to launch it now using IIS, as we've done before, nothing new. Give this a second, it's faster obviously. All right, and notice I have a control that says check to show calendar, but it doesn't do anything just yet. That means we need to add more features to it. It doesn't actually show the calendar when you check it. So close that for a second. So now we need to find the checkbox control. So that's above here. And we're going to add a new property and a value for the checkbox. This is the checkbox markup. Run at server, yes. Text, check to show calendar. ID, checkbox 1. You can obviously change the ID to something more meaningful. And here I will say the following now. Auto, post back and set that to true. We want to make sure that when we interact with the checkbox, you automatically get fresh copies of the page from the server. And you do that by using auto post back. Okay, build the page. Make sure it's built. And then let's give it another launch here to observe the difference. Okay, and now it says check to show calendar. So I check it, and as you can see, we need to add additional features because this isn't working just yet. So I'm going to close this. I can now scroll to the bottom of the entire page here, okay? All the way to the bottom. And remember, we had the jQuery, which I've commented out. I put this on the bottom in the previous videos. I've commented out here for our purposes. We don't need it anymore. And at the next stage, take a look here. I've got the calendar control. I've got the checkbox control up above, but the two don't seem to be interacting in a meaningful way. So to make that happen, take a look. Go into design mode and then double click on the checkbox. Double click on it in the interface. And this is going to bring up our C# code behind file default.aspx.cs. And here within the stub, we are going to make the connection between the two objects, between the checkbox. So let's take a look at what I mean here, and the calendar, that is. I'm going to say this, if, and then checkbox one.checked. In other words, this is the code to be run after somebody checks the box, puts a check mark in the little box. So if checkbox one.checked, if that is true, somebody has checked the box, and notice hovering mouse over checked. You see where it says BOOL? That's short for Boolean. Some people say Boolean, some people say Boolean. It's a true or false kind of quantity. That's why you can use it with the if. Just as in SQL, we have if-else blocks. Same logic applies here. After that, you're going to put curly braces. In SQL, the logical equivalent was, as you might remember, begin and end. Same logic, right? And because we're going to run multiple lines of code after the if, you've got to have those lines of code enclosed within the curly braces to indicate they are to be treated as a single unit. That the if controls, for example, those multiple lines of code. If you have usually just one line of code after the if, you don't need the curly braces. If you have multiple lines of code after the if, you usually do need the curly braces to group those lines into a single logical unit. So I'm going to say the following at the next stage. I'm going to say calendar 1 here, and then dot visible equals true. So remember what this is saying. After someone checks the box, you want to show the calendar, and you do that by writing calendar 1 dot visible equals true. That's the reason for that, okay? Of course, the other possibility is that the page launches, the box is first checked, you show the calendar, and then after that, what can you do? Well, you can again uncheck the box. So you've got to respond to that also as follows. As an example, I will say else. And then I'm going to say, as you might imagine, you may want to pause the video and just predict, what I would type next. But I'll just continue. I'm going to say calendar 1 dot and then visible equals false. So remember, runs after check is applied. I mean, the box is checked, and then runs after check is removed. Like that. That's the purpose of those two lines. All right, I'm going to give this a build here. I will make a couple additional refinements to be very clear. All right, we've saved that, and let me go here and launch the page again. Give it a second to load. Let's see what happens. Okay, so notice that first when the page launches, all we see is check to show calendar. So I'm going to check it, and notice the calendar becomes visible. But now, if you look carefully at the text, it would very likely be helpful to change the text, because now the calendar is visible, and you may want to say something next to the box, like, for example, uncheck to hide calendar. See that? I hope you understand what I'm saying with that. So I'm going to close this down, and again, I'm doing that just to show you that it's possible to do it. So the question is, where does that go? Remember, the page launches. At first it says check to show calendar. So you check it. The calendar becomes visible. And now to make the purpose of the box very clear, I'm going to switch it so it says uncheck okay, to hide calendar. And now the question is, where does that go between these two? Does it go in the if or the else? It's a bit of a puzzle. Maybe pause the video, think about it for a few seconds. All right, so let's take a look. And again, I'm just showing you my way of doing things, not the way of doing things. So I'm going to say here the file, I'm going to say checkbox1 dot and then text equals, and I'm putting it right after where it says checked. So remember, this runs after the check mark is applied to the box. The keyword is after. Because it's after that, that means the calendar becomes visible, and very likely at the next stage, you would want to have an instruction next to the box that says now what to do next. So I'm going to say checkbox1.text, and between double quotes, I'm going to say something like this, for example, uncheck to insert date and hide calendar. I'm just going to leave it as that so everything fits on the page here. All right, let me move this up like that. So remember, page launches, somebody checks the box, you make the calendar visible, and you switch immediately the text on the checkbox so it says what to do next, which would be to obviously uncheck the box. You see? Now, let me just save this. Think about what might happen next at the next stage here when somebody actually unchecks the box. So when you uncheck the box, what kind of text should be shown back to the user as the next instruction? As soon as you uncheck the box, the next stage would be to again check the box, correct? So the opposite. So I'm going to do that by typing checkbox1.text equals, and then again back to check to show calendar. Terminate with a semicolon as shown here. All right, let me save this. Let me build everything. All right, I'm going to give it a go in Chrome here. All right, so at first, let's see, are the instructions clear, right? That's the key to what we are doing here. It says check to show calendar. That's very clear. So I check it and it shows the calendar. It does. Okay. And immediately the text on it now says uncheck to insert and, well, uncheck to insert date and hide down below. Let me make this a bit smaller like that. Obviously, the interface could be refined. I'm not an interface guy, to be honest, per se, but I know enough to make things work. So here I'm going to say uncheck to insert date and hide. So the instruction is very clear on what to do next. When I uncheck it, it hides the calendar. When I check it, it shows the calendar. So the purpose of the box is very clear. I hope you see that. Now, take a look here. When I interact with this calendar, look very carefully up top where it says localhost. You see the page icon flicker. That means we're getting a fresh copy of everything from the server. See that? But it's more than that. Take a look. Imagine I insert the name in the box and such. So I'm going to say, for example, here, Tom. Okay, some fake email. So Tom at blah blah blah.com. Doesn't really matter that much. Okay, and I interact with the calendar. See that? And the page is flickering up top. So we're going to disable that behavior. Take a look. I'm going to close this next. And to make only a portion of a web page essentially update without causing the flickering to appear, you use AJAX, which is asynchronous JavaScript. And the beautiful part is that with ASP.NET, they have a lot of built-in controls that take care of that very easily. So go back to default.aspx for a second and switch into source view. And remember, we have the checkbox, we have the calendar control, and we want the interaction of the calendar here to be such that the little page icon and the tab of the browser doesn't flicker anymore when I interact with the calendar. So to do that, you will take the following steps. Type up here around the calendar control. You're going to type ASP and then colon and then update panel like that. And make sure you give it the attribute that says run at equals server. And then because of the design of the update panel, you need to also add a content template. Like that. And then into the content template, you can drag your calendar control. So the code that defines the calendar goes into the content template, as shown here. All right, I hope you've got all of that. Let me just delete some of these extra spaces here. We don't need them, obviously. All right, so update panel contains the content template, which then contains the calendar. Then you close the tags /calendar/content template /update panel. All right, make sure everything's matched properly. And now to make the update panel work, you need one more control, or one more object, which is this one. From the left side, add the following type here, script manager. And you need that just because of the design of ASP and so on. So go to the top, for example, of the page here. And right after this, just put in script manager object. And as you can see, it is just an object, right? ASP:script manager, run at server, closing tag, and it's got an ID also, which means you could, for example, use it in C# if you wanted to, by referring to script manager 1 as its name, as its ID. But for our purposes, it just has to be present so that the update panel works correctly, meaning it gets rid of flickering of the little page icon in the tab of the browser. So I'm going to leave that here. And let's see, I've got that. And now let's take a look. So build this entire page. Give it a good build. And let me launch this again. Let's observe the result here. Okay, so we have check to show calendar. Take a look. Expand that. And it shows the calendar. The message is changed to a new instruction that's sensible. Uncheck to insert date and hide. What does that mean? Take a look. I'm going to say 4. And when I select the 4 in the calendar, you see that it doesn't flicker up top anymore. Even if I scroll through the months, I'm not getting flickering in the top anymore. Look very carefully at the local host. No flickering. So I'm going to set this. And look very carefully where I said insert date and hide. Take a look. I'm going to uncheck the box. And notice the date gets inserted into the box. But if I go back to check to show calendar, what happens next? Well, uncheck, and it goes back into the box with the updated date. Very good. And again, no flickering because we have the calendar object and an update panel. So essentially, for the purposes of the page now, the calendar exists in its own little space. And when you, for example, navigate through it, click on it, and so on, right? The page doesn't flicker up top anymore. That's good. And at the last stage, I just want to make sure everything is working by inserting one more record at the bottom. You want to keep checking that. So I'm going to just input some text. It doesn't really matter what it is. Like that. Uncheck to insert date and hide. Okay. And then submit. And it gets inserted down below. That is what we want to see. Okay, if I delete that, it gets deleted. Good. So I'm going to close this page at this point. I think this is kind of interesting. And go back to default.aspx.cs for a second. All right, remember this was our C# here. So I want to go through this at least one more time. I'm going to zoom out a little. So remember at the top, we had the connection string, which came from the server essentially. Tells you how to reach the server. And then in button submit _click, we made a connection object, a command object. We set the command type to stored procedure. We added parameters to the command object with values. So from the name and the email and the date saved now, remember, comes from the calendar itself, not from the box. I still, however, wanted to show you the interaction between two controls because that could be a bit interesting at times. What I mean by that is the interaction between the calendar and the text box for the dates. All right, then, as you saw previously, because the connection could throw errors, same thing with this com here object, right? You see when you hover your mouse over it, remember it gives you exceptions, errors. I put that in a try. When those were generated, we caught them here by displaying a useful message on the web page with label error.text equals ex.message. Finally, You want to make sure the connection is closed properly, so you put that in the finally block. And remember to be sure that after we insert a new record through the text boxes, the grid view down below is properly updated with the new information. I had grid view 1.databind at the bottom of that. That means updated view. And then further, remember this quantity right here, this code runs when you interact with the calendar. See that? But remember that because we have now things in an update panel, this gets executed, but after basically, right, you interact with the checkbox. Next, finally, we had this block which connected, as you saw, the checkbox and the calendar. So as I open the calendar, I check the box, the calendar gets opened, the message on the box gets switched to the next logical instruction, which would be to uncheck the box and hide the calendar. Okay, you want to make sure that in SSMS, everything that we have done is visible, which means if I save records from the page, that those records obviously, right, are getting saved. I'm going to show you that as a last step here. I'm going to open back the management studio here. Okay, let me log in here. All right, and then let's see what is going on. So I'm going to open a new query window. I'm going to enlarge the view here to say 200%. And I just want to make sure that, let's see what happens. I'm going to say now, use my DBase. I'm going to say go, and I'm going to say select star from, I believe it was person table, wasn't it? That we called it. Like that. So I'm going to use that first. Execute that, good. Execute that. And make sure that, let's make this change one time, okay? So go back here, launch the page again. You got to confirm all of this is nicely synchronized. All right, just another launch here for a second. All right, show the calendar, insert the date into the box. Now keep in mind something, I'm going to show you one more detail. I know there's always one more detail, that's how these things work, unfortunately. So Tom and then blah, blah, blah at gmail.com. Submit. Okay, and let's go back to SSMS for a second. Select this, execute, and notice the record has been saved to the table. That is exactly what we want to see. If you go into the databases node, and if you go to my DBase, and let's see, programmability, that folder, go into stored procedures. Remember we had this insert proc, like that. So if you right click on it, you see where it says stored procedure like that. You can go to script stored procedure as, and then you can alter it from here also, you see? You can go to alter, and then new query editor window. So remember the stored procedure that we created looks like this. And after you save it, obviously, you know, we added some basic code, maybe like this stuff here. But then when you open it here, it adds some additional information, as you can see. Use my DBase Go, this bit, and so on. I just want you to be aware of that when you alter it, you can do it from here, but it's going to add some additional pieces of information that are not present there by default. And I'm going to close this now. And that is it. So thank you so much, friends. I'll see you next one.